Good afternoon. We're going to give folks just a moment to log on. Don't worry, Adrian, not the full 5-minute Zoom.
I know you like your courtesy 3 to 4 minutes for Zoom, Julie.
We give people just one more minute and then we'll get started. Good afternoon. My name is Julie Tai. I'm president of the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. Together with our friends at Citizens Campaign for the Environment, we've put together many forums to educate the public about important climate and environmental projects and policies. Thank you all for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn to hear more about Avangrid's Excelsior Connect proposal. Just so everyone is aware, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted later for those who are not able to watch the whole thing or who are not able to participate today. Last year, the New York State Department of Public Service established a new Tier 4 within the Clean Energy Standard in response to NYSERDA's Clean Energy Standard White Paper, which states that reaching New York's goal to have 70% renewable energy production by 2030 would be difficult to achieve if the state does not displace a substantial portion of New York City's fossil fuel energy sources. Through Tier 4, renewable energy systems will be located in or delivered energy to Zone J, or New York City. NYSERDA currently has a Tier 4 RFP solicitation pending and has received several bids in response. The New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund and Citizens Campaign for the Environment are hosting this webinar series of Lunch and Learns to highlight some of those bids. And I believe we have a link in our chat. Excelsior Connect is Avangrid Network's innovative response to Tier 4. Today, we are joined by Avangrid to hear more about the proposed transmission line. Before I introduce the Avangrid team, I'd like to welcome Adrian Esposito, Executive Director of the Citizens Campaign for the Environment, to share opening remarks. Adrian.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Julie said, I'm Adrian Esposito with Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and CCE, and together with our partnership with the New York League of Conservation Voters, has been working to bring a lot more of these projects to a public forum, to engage the public, to educate you so you can understand the various projects that are being considered, weighed, and evaluated by New York State so we can transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. We're actually watching history here happen here in New York State. We've all been addicted to fossil fuels for decades since the Industrial Revolution, but in the year 2021, we're making a change. And it's very important that the public is educated, informed, and supportive of that change. And that's what these educational forums are about, so that you have the opportunity to hear about the project firsthand from those who are proposing the project, and you can ask questions and get your answers. And we think that that is absolutely critical. But we also think it's critical to continue advancing this transition. You know, frankly, I think you are, as we are, really don't want to have to hear about more storms like Ida. You know, when people are dying, literally dying in New York and New Jersey and other states from a rainstorm, we have to make a change. And unfortunately, I feel like America has been having our finger on the pause button for the last 20 years when it comes to fighting climate change. And now we need to take our finger off of the pause button and put it on the fast forward button. And that's what New York State is doing. And they're leading the way to do that and to make the change. So we're happy to be able to present to you another project that is being considered, as Julie said, under Tier 4. And what this looks like for you to gain knowledge and to be able to engage in this transition and support this transition from fossil fuels to a renewable, cleaner, safer energy future. So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and I'm going to send it back to Julie.
Great. Thank you so much, Adrian. Before I introduce the Avangrid team, I want to remind the audience to submit questions to our presenters in the Q&A feature that we have below. After Avangrid's presentation, we will allow for audience questions to be asked and Avangrid to help answer those. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing Sebastian Libinati and Michael Jameson from Avangrid. Sebastian Libinati currently serves as Vice President for Business Development. Mr. Libinati previously held similar positions in developing growth opportunities for Hydro-Quebec, which is a large vertically integrated utility. Mr. Libinati has more than 10 years of experience with energy trading activities, structuring and negotiations of power purchase agreements, and development of growth opportunities internationally. Michael Jameson serves as a Senior Manager for Corporate Communications in New York for Avangrid. In this role, Michael has dual responsibilities, serving as the Head of Communications for Avangrid's 2 New York utilities, while also supporting Avangrid's key strategic initiatives, including Excelsior Connect, where Michael has helped lead the community and stakeholder engagement efforts for the project. Prior to joining Avangrid, Michael managed state government and community affairs for the New York Independent System Operator and served as Director of Communications for the Associated General Contractors of New York State. Welcome, Sebastian and Michael. Over to you.
Thanks, Julie. All right. So hopefully you can see the presentation.
We can.
Beautiful. All right. Again, thank you to Julie and Adrian for having us here today. We're really excited to talk to you about Excelsior Connect and the opportunity that New York State has, as part of the Excelsior Connect project. There's a number of initiatives that we've really worked on and we're proud of as part of this project. And as much as we've worked on the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of the project, we've also really spent a considerable amount of time focused on the benefits to the state and the benefits ultimately to the communities that will be within this project's right of way or within the service area. So with that, we'll get started. So who is Avangrid? Avangrid is a New York State utility first and foremost. We own NYSEG and RG&E, 2 companies that have been a part of this state for more than 100 years. Our employees live here. They send the kids to school here. They pay taxes here. So we are part of the community here in New York, which is why we're so proud to put forth this Excelsior Connect proposal. As part of Avangrid, we really have 2 main lines of business. We have Avangrid Networks, which owns and operates utilities across the Northeast and also is responsible for transmission development, which Sebastian will talk a little bit about in a few minutes. But then we have Avangrid Renewables as well. Avangrid Renewables is the 3rd largest wind producer in the United States. And we're also helping to lead the nation's offshore wind development with a number of projects along the East Coast. So we are deeply committed to a sustainable, cleaner, greener future as we move forward. We've also been awarded a number of different prizes that we're very proud of here. So we've been selected as one of the world's most ethical companies by Ethisphere Institute. We are Forbes Just 100, which is #1 in the utility industry on that list. And our parent company, Iberdrola, is one of the world's largest wind producers and really allows us to leverage a lot of resources and expertise globally. Because as we know, some of the nations around the world, like Spain and others, have been using some of the technologies that we're talking about for a long time. And our parent company, Iberdrola, allows us to tap into that intelligence and capability, providing us a different view and perspective than maybe others may have. So we think that's a real benefit for Avangrid as a whole. So a little bit about Excelsior Connect. Excelsior Connect is a 108-mile transmission line that was developed in response to NYSERDA's Tier 4 proposal. And it is designed first and foremost with the community in mind. So it is designed to be all underground and all within existing rights-of-way, starting in the Sullivan County area, moving over to the Thruway, and then follows the Thruway down into New York City. And Sebastian will talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes. But really, what we designed this line to do is really be resilient, provide more renewables into New York City, and provide a reliable source of energy for decades to come. And if you look at the Tier 4 proposal, what Tier 4 was really designed to do, as Julie mentioned, was find a solution to the tale of two grids. So as you look at New York's energy system, you have a lot of renewables being sited in the north part of the state, but we have congestion in the center part of the state. And so if we're going to meet the state's clean energy goals, we have to figure out ways to move the renewables that are being developed in upstate New York down into the New York City area where the bulk of demand is. The New York Independent System Operator has written quite a bit about this in their power trends reports, often referred to as the tale of two grids, where you have a very clean, zero emitting grid in upstate New York, and a grid that relies more predominantly on fossil fuels in downstate. And Excelsior Connect is designed to really alleviate some of these issues and move that clean, cheap, renewable power from upstate into New York City. And what our project would do is ultimately terminate in Queens, really the heart of what's often been referred to as Asthma Alley. So we're looking as part of Excelsior Connect to really clean the air up, allow higher emitting fuel types to retire, and deliver that cheap renewable energy into New York City to provide a cleaner, greener future for all New Yorkers to enjoy. As part of our project, we've certainly been talking to a lot of community groups and different stakeholders across the state, and we're very, very proud as part of this proposal to have a number of supporters of our project spanning pretty much the entire economy of the state, whether it's labor, business, the environment, community groups. Excelsior Connect makes sense for the state. It is a in-state solution designed to benefit New Yorkers, to be built by New Yorkers for New Yorkers. And that message has really resonated with communities. And I think communities are excited about the opportunity that Excelsior Connect provides to their communities, particularly when you factor in some of the key design aspects like all underground, all within existing rights of way. That offers a lot of opportunity for communities alongside the benefits of moving that renewable power into New York City and ultimately helping the state meet its clean energy goals. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sebastian, who will talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the project and some of the design elements. Sebastian?
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And don't hesitate, Mike, to chime in if you want to add anything. As Julie mentioned, I'm VP of Business Development at Avangrid Networks. Our team is really 100% focused on developing transmission solutions, whether offshore or onshore, to bring renewables into load centers, also to fix reliability issues when there's an opportunity. But we're really excited to be here today to talk about Excelsior Connect. And if you're a little bit like me, I like to start with visuals, right? What is it really, Excelsior Connect, and what are we talking about? What's the route? What does it look like? So here's the map. Our converter station, the northern converter station, will be located in Sullivan County, next to Cooper's Corner substation, and will run fully underground, starting in Route 17, and going east, merging to the Thruway, the 87, and then further south into the 287. Again, fully underground onto Nyack, where we would go underneath the riverbed, and I'll get into more details about the river crossing. And on the eastern side, close to Tarrytown, this is where we exit the river, and we continue fully underground on the 87, and then locating our southern converter station in the Bronx. where we would convert, DC into AC and run underwater and underground cables into Rainy substation. So just to give you a sense again on, the point of interconnection in why we selected Cooper's Corner, especially, number one, it's still in Zone E per New York ISO's, zonal energy markets, which is just before the, the Central East interface where, most of the power is congested and is not entirely allowed to get to New York City, right? So, but it's also at the same time, one of the closest substations in Zone E to New York City, which is very important because when developing these very complex transmission projects, having a shorter route really could have a significant positive impact, right? One thing that you'll hear me say a couple times is that how much time we spent and analyze over and over again, multiple routes and point of interconnections. And one of the reasons why we selected Cooper's Corner is also it allows us, easy access to building this fully underground cable next to roadways, right? Which is very critical to us since we had this goal to always minimize, environmental and community impact, right? And while we were developing this project, the Biden administration came down with this fact sheet and was essentially working with the Department of Transportation on really helping and easing the permitting and siting process for future high voltage transmission lines close to roadways, right? So we thought, well, we got lucky on this one, but if you really think about it and we think about the future growth of renewable power and how much, transmission is needed, thinking about how to co-locate transmission, especially high voltage transmission infrastructure along roadways is very critical, right? Especially if we want to meet those aggressive targets. So moving to, the main benefits and strengths of Excelsior Connect, again, to us, number one is, the river crossing. The whole time we were thinking about how do we get this done and minimize, interference in environmental sensitive areas, whether it's parks or, bodies of water, especially the Hudson River, right? So after talking to cable installer manufacturers, Riverkeeper, and a lot of stakeholders, we came down with a pretty clever idea that essentially minimizes the impact to the river since we are locating our cable in a stretch that is about 2 to 2.5 miles long, close to the Tappan Zee Bridge, right? So definitely very proud of that. A lot of work went into that. So we can talk a little bit more in details about it later on. As Mike said before, we have the privilege to tap into our global expertise with Iberdrola, right? And it's particularly important here for Excelsior Connect since this is really HVDC, right? So high voltage direct current technology. And we are the only transmission developer in this Tier 4 RFP who has actual experience with HVDC. So that to us, especially given the complexity of the project, is really meaningful. Obviously, the underlying of all of this, the reason why we're doing this, as Mike pointed out, is reduce asthma issues in the city, really retire these old peakers. And what HVDC technology allows is that once you install this 1,200 megawatt Southern Converter Station, and you have one in upstate New York functioning as a collector station, basically taking all that renewable power into the city, well, it allows to, think about this as having a 1,200 megawatt renewable power into the city. And so within the next few years, as we build more of these, we'll be able to retire these old peakers and clean the air in New York City. Something that we are very, very proud of and work really hard on it is the fact that this project is 100% in New York, right? The transmission is 100% in New York. Our generating partners, 100% in New York. So that means that all the benefits stay in New York. Our workforce is from New York. So again, I think that, that says it all. I also talked about the use of roadways. And again, I just want to repeat this because going forward within the next 10 to 15 years, if we really want to meet those aggressive CO2 goals in increasing our renewable consumption, using and co-locating high voltage transmission lines along roadways, I think is critical, right? So we are taking this opportunity with Excelsior Connect to make it a real business case and showcase that all over the U.S., right? The last but not least, and Mike will talk a bit more about this, is how much this whole process, developing this Excelsior Connect, has been a lot of much more about listening than talking. Yeah, we met with so many organizations, environmental justice organizations, trade labor unions, a lot of stakeholders, and their input, is really translated into Excelsior Connect. So we're really proud of that. Moving to the next one, and you might have seen this coming out from Riverkeeper, really stating some of the priorities and why they think that Excelsior Connect really responds to what Tier 4 should be, right? And this is, again, I can't say this enough, how much work we've put into this and how proud our team is to have this sort of proposal, right? So number one on their priorities is really protect the Hudson River, right? And we spend so much time thinking about using the best technology, the right methods to avoid laying cables down the river. And I think we have achieved that. And part of it comes also from the discussion with Riverkeeper, right? Avoid hundreds of miles of cable in the Hudson. Again, I think we all know the history of the Hudson, and we want to avoid any more disruption in the next foreseeable years. Project that benefits New York with, generation, wind and solar from New York, that's a critical one, right? So again, all the benefits staying in the state. And as you may know, when we're developing underground project, that really means we're trenching and we're using a lot of workers, right? Which means a lot of union labor and a lot of job creation in the state along the route in different counties for several years. So this is, again, all the benefits go back to New Yorkers. And I won't read John's quote here, but I think, again, for us is, it means a lot to us. You have so many different options when you're developing transmission, but we really spend a lot of time on trying to find the most environmental friendly solution. So we're really proud of it. Moving to the next one. Thanks, Mike. So just a quick snapshot on the competitive landscape. And one thing I'll say here is, we always welcome competition. Competition means, that there's a lot of interest. It means that ratepayers can feel like there's going to be pressure on prices, and they're going to get the best solution, and they're going to get to decide which solution is better, right? So this has been a great process. As you can see, there's a lot of participation from different developers. One thing that stands out here for us and for Excelsior Connect is, as I said before, we're talking about 108 miles, so the shortest route to New York City. And the tunneling under the Hudson River, we're talking about max 2.5 miles. And within that, some of the things that we've discussed with different stakeholders is how can we, from east and west, getting into the river, can we use HDD, so a horizontal drilling, basically to lay the cable underneath the riverbed so there's no disruption at all. So that's definitely something we're looking at right now. To really minimize to almost no impact at all, right? I won't get into the details of the point of withdrawal interconnection. I think it's going to be very boring for you guys. This is more for the electric nerds. But I'll just make one last comment here on the HVDC experience. So our team is currently, we started construction of the NECC HVDC project in Maine back in January of this year. We've built the longest submarine HVDC cable in partnership with National Grid in the UK, which we commissioned last year. And we're also developing the East Anglia 3 HVDC project, which is an offshore project using HVDC technology in the UK. So we know the technology, we're comfortable with it. We have a lot of experience in not only the construction, but also the operation and maintenance, which is very critical here. Thanks, Mike. There's a lot to be said. I think Mike is going to talk about community engagement plan. One thing I'll say is, believe me, we spend just as much time in, on the technical and engineering design as we did on the community engagement plan. This was critical to us right from the start, right? And also through the leadership of NYSERDA that is always making this, harder and harder, and make sure that all the developers, take into account these factors. So you'll see very often that when you look at projects, they're going to talk about direct, indirect, job benefits, indirect jobs, but you rarely see, and we wanted to take a step further and add another component to this, right? Which is, how are we affecting disadvantaged communities, right? And through all these meetings we had along, in the last 6 to 8 months, we wanted to find a way to create a long-lasting positive impact on these communities, right? What does it really mean is that obviously when you're building a transmission project in a specific county, there's a economic, booming, right? There's more spend, there's more workers and all, but then what really happens afterwards, right? Other than property taxes, what is there? What is left for the community around it, right? So this is where we spend a lot of time. And one of the things we thought about is, well, what we really need is to focus on our, disadvantaged communities and find, training programs. How do we get them to be part of the workforce, right? Because if we train and educate them in our industry, whether it's offshore HVDC technology, heat pump training programs, then they can really get high-paying jobs, and it will create a long-lasting effect and a positive one. And I can tell you, as a 5-year-old who've migrated to Canada in the early 90s with very young parents and lived in not so fortunate areas in that period of time, there's a lot of people in those communities that the only thing they're asking for is an opportunity. And it's all through education and getting those jobs, those high-paying jobs, so that it can create that long-lasting positive effect. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. I think it's a great segue into this CUNY-SUNY Clean Energy Jobs Consortium that we've built as part of Excelsior Connect, because frankly, I very much view the numbers that Sebastian just showed from disadvantaged communities and others as really the starting point, right? So that's prior to our efforts that we're about to talk about. So what is the SUNY-CUNY Consortium? Well, it's still growing, frankly. Here's some of the members that we have, a really strong representation, both from the city and upstate, really as far north as the Mohawk Valley. And continuing along the Capital Region, Hudson Valley, Westchester area, Catskills, and frankly, 3 of the 5 boroughs in New York. So what is it? It's an agreement, not just with Avangrid, but with all of these SUNY and CUNY schools to work together and look at the clean energy economy as a whole and what's needed to meet the goals in the CLCPA, and develop curriculum and programs to help train the next generation that's going to be needed in the energy industry. If you look at the energy industry as a whole, it's not just Avangrid, but the energy industry as a whole, 50% of the workforce is going to be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. 50% in 5 years. And that's just to maintain the status quo today. Factor in the CLCPA goals and all of the things that we have to do around transmission, energy efficiency, cleaning up the transportation industry, electrification of our heating and cooling systems. There is so much work that's going to be needed to meet the goals that Avangrid really sees Excelsior Connect as a foundational project for helping train an economy-wide workforce that's going to be ready and skilled enough to meet those challenges head on and build the things that need to be built to meet those goals. So we are looking at really forging a partnership with these colleges, with other private sector industries, to look at the clean energy economy, understand what jobs are going to be needed, understand what training is going to be needed, and then recruit people into these programs so that we have a workforce that's ready to build it here in New York. So ultimately, certainly HVDC technology that supports Excelsior Connect will be a part of this, but we're also looking at a lot of other technologies, wind, solar, energy efficiency, HVAC, things that I mentioned. Because the CLCPA climate goals are fast approaching, and we need to start that training now to ensure that we have the workforce ready to build the projects that are going to be needed. If the SUNY-CUNY Consortium is first and foremost. Alongside that, though, is really our efforts on equity. Equity and diversity inclusion are really important to Avangrid. And as we look at the Excelsior Connect project, it's not just good enough to build that talent pipeline into the clean energy industry with the efforts of SUNY and CUNY. We also need to build a workforce that's as diverse as projects like Excelsior Connect are going to benefit. So with that said, Avangrid is really working to do some outreach in the environmental justice community. You can see a number of our inaugural guests that we had at our first EJ roundtable, because we are focused on building partnerships that go out and recruit from disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities, to ensure that we're creating a diverse workforce, and that they're also advising SUNY, CUNY, Avangrid, and all of these partners on how to recruit. Because I think oftentimes part of what we think is we go in and we try and explain all the benefits of Excelsior Connect, the SUNY CUNY consortium. I think you end up with kind of the same populations looking into the career and on the career track. What we're looking to do is really partner with people that are trusted in these disadvantaged and environmental justice communities who can help us recruit the talent that we need to not only meet the state's clean energy goals, but also to diversify the workforce in a real way. And what I would say too on the EJ front is that alongside our efforts with the SUNY CUNY consortium, with our efforts in environmental justice communities, is the effort of broadband. So I think, as part of the SUNY CUNY consortium, we are going to leverage each other's strengths and talents. And I think the one good thing about COVID is that it's opened up people's comfort level with doing things remotely. That's why we're on Zoom today doing things. And so SUNY and CUNY schools that we've talked to feel like, for years, we've all been trying to do these separate programs around clean energy and environment. And we've had 12, 13 different efforts going on. This opportunity allows us to bring everybody into one room, share our resources, share our strengths, really collaborate in a meaningful way, and build one program using each other's resources that can really help move the effort forward. But part of that, when you talk about equity, is if the program is going to be open for everyone, it also means that everyone has to have the same access to the program. And so as part of Excelsior Connect, what we've talked about is really encouraging broadband and high-speed internet access partners to potentially lay cable next to Excelsior Connect and expand broadband access for all New Yorkers. Because we really think if we're going to close the education gap and that's needed to create the workforce of the future, we also then have to make sure that they have access to the same opportunities and resources. And so we're really excited by the potential that Excelsior Connect offers in expanding high-speed and broadband internet access into the Catskills, into the Hudson Valley, and into communities that may not have it right now, and that it may have seen difficulties during the COVID environment in keeping up in the same way that other communities have. So that is a significant focus to us as we look at the EJ effort that we have as part of this project, because again, we want to recruit folks from disadvantaged communities. We want to make sure that they're part of this program, and being part of that program also means ensuring that they have the resources they need to be successful in the programs and to take advantage of those educational opportunities. So with that, I would just thank everybody again for having us, for attending this webinar. I'm sure there's a lot of great questions out there, and turn it back to you, Julie and Adrian.
Well, there may not be a lot of questions, but there are some questions.
Fair enough. Let's get to them.
Okay, I'm just going to start with the last one because I don't think this was clear enough, and I think this is an essential question, but I will get to the other two, so nobody, don't panic. What will the renewable power sources for the Excelsior connection be? If you could clarify that.
Sure, Mike, I can take that. Thanks for the question. So it's a combination of solar and wind power developed upstate New York. So we're talking about several thousand megawatts of both of wind and power, mainly the future development of solar. And one thing I'll say on that specific question is that this will be the first HVDC controllable line within the New York ISO system, right? Which means not a DC line interconnected from either Ontario, PJM to New York, but really within the system. So what this really means is that the Northern Converter Station in Sullivan County in Zone E will function as a collector station, right? We think that to efficiently operate this HVDC line and get all the benefits, we think that the New York ISO should operate it in the same way they operate their system nowadays, which means this converter station will allow thousands of megawatts every single year to be delivered into New York City, right?
And Sebastian, if I could just build on that, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but as part of the HVDC technology, one of the key benefits too is the bidirectional flow of the line. So as we think about not just the benefits of New York City right now that this project offers, but we think about as New York builds offshore wind and New York City begins getting a lot of its energy from renewables in that downstate area, you may have the opportunity, depending on generation mix on a day-to-day basis, of actually backflowing that energy and providing renewable energy into the Hudson Valley, Westchester. And as we think about some of the issues and challenges that downstate region outside of New York have faced with the closure of Indian Point or other avenues, being able to backflow energy, clean renewable energy into that Hudson Valley area is not just good for environmental justice, but it's good for ultimately the total emissions profile of the state.
So it was like a good follow-on to that. The question is, where is Excelsior Connect in the NISO interconnection queue?
We've filed for, and I can't remember the precise queue number right now, but we did file back in Q1 2021. So we're just following the standard process with New York ISO.
Oh, and apparently someone wants to follow on in your backflow comment. Is there a chance to piggyback Westchester?
What do you mean precisely piggyback Westchester? It really give us more precision on that question. And
that's all it said in the QA. But what I will say is obviously, Westchester has seen a change in its power, given that Indian Point has closed, and they are working on how to address the fact that they have constraints on natural gas in their community. So I'm guessing they mean, could you also, include power to and from Westchester? I'm speculating. So if the person who asked that question who wants to clarify or correct me, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, so Julie, I think what it's getting to the heart of is that, as New York begins building its offshore wind profile and the fuel mix changes in the southern part of the state, the ISO being able to have that option ultimately will benefit Westchester and the lower Hudson Valley.
All right, let's go back to William's question. It was the first one. I don't want to skip it. Will the cable be pipe type cable or direct burial dry conductor? The New York State Thruway Authority has historically resisted construction in its right of way. Has the Thruway Authority endorsed this effort?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, so different ways were explored. The direct pipe definitely, the way we're moving forward, and I can tell you that we started these discussions with the Thruway Authority years ago when we were developing a project that used to be called the Connect New York, right? So directly from Marcy into Ramapo. And so we engage in conversations with the Thruway, with the Department of Transportation, with Federal Highway. And overall, everybody's been extremely understanding and resourceful, helpful. There's a lot of challenges, of course, when it comes to traffic. How do we deal with shoulders? Can we build on the median and so on? But I can tell you overall, the reception's been great. And I think everybody, and there's something important to say, is that whether it's a throughway or, the Department of Transportation, everybody understands the goals of the state and how aggressive they are. And they understand that they're going to need to be part of it and more flexible, right? So I really think that whether it's Excelsior Connect or future projects, we are going to co-locate transmission infrastructure along roadways in the near future, for sure.
Yeah, and I would just add to that as well. If you look at the change in administration in DC, the Biden administration has been talking a lot about this because, frankly, it just makes sense, right? We have, transmission is the great enabler as we think about bringing more and more renewables onto the system. And so if we're going to do it, and we're going to build a clean superhighway, frankly, one of the best uses of our current highway is to provide a right-of-way for, a clean energy highway. And so the Biden administration has been very focused on it. I think this proposal, frankly, aligns very much with the language and some of the things that we've seen coming out of DC. And so we think ultimately the state of New York will equally be as supportive, given it's going to help meet the state's clean energy goals and aligns with many of the policy directions that we're heading on clean energy.
And I think they want to know, sorry, we did get a follow-up of the type of cable that you're using, if there's a simple answer to that.
Yeah, it's pipe type. I mean, definitely the DC cable is going to be protected. I mean, we can go in further details on, how we're, going to build, and depending on the temperatures and the depth of, once we get into water or, in the city, we use different types of protections, right? But yeah, I'm happy to, provide more details on, the technical side, depending on where the route is and what technology we're going to use to protect it, the type of concrete and so on.
All right, so there's another wonky question. Is HVDC direct current? How does that work and why is it better?
Yeah, I mean, the main benefit and what we've seen in the last 50 years is the real advantage is just to be able to transmit, a large amount of power for long distances with minimal losses, right? So most of the system today is built on AC. Losses are much higher. But when you're thinking about bringing really, thousands of megawatts from one point to another in the most efficient manner without, exceeding, increasing losses, you want to use HVDC technology, right? And in terms of flexibility for New York ISO, it's great. We're talking about milliseconds on, how you can ramp up, ramp down the technology and push power, as Mike pointed out, on, both directions, basically.
And next question is, can you speak more about your labor agreements and relationship with unions?
Yeah, so as part of the NYSERDA RFP, one of the things that we worked on with our contractors as well was to sign a couple of MOUs with labor agreements, right? And as our project is relocated upstate and downstate, we work with different trade labor unions to sign these MOUs, which basically in a nutshell are setting the base to if awarded, we would the day after, we would basically be negotiating with them to bring labor, union labor into our project. And especially in this one, which is, again, because it's underground, we're going to be working with union labor 100% of the time. So yeah, so we already signed MOUs and we're looking forward, if awarded, to negotiate those final agreements.
Thank you.
I suspect I know the answer to this, but what is the status of the Excelsior connection in the PSC Article 7 transmission process?
Yeah, this is a good question. As I mentioned before, a couple of years back, we started developing this Connect New York project, and we had a lot of the work and field studies done for Connect New York. So now what we're doing for Excelsior Connect is to basically update, since we also changed route in a portion of the project, we're updating those surveys, getting the engineering together. So hopefully we can file for an Article 7 by end of year, or probably, to be more realistic, Q1 2022.
Can you speak a little bit more about the potential environmental impact on the Hudson River of your project?
Yeah, no, definitely. I said before during the presentation, we spent a lot of time on this. It is definitely, from a development standpoint, easier to basically lay cables down the river, right? We took an opposite direction where we said, well, we don't want to create an impact on the river, so what can we do? And this is when we came up with this idea of using roadways. And then when we got to the river crossing, where we spent a lot of time, we look at different alternatives with different manufacturers, cable installers, and depending on the experience and the characteristics of the Hudson River, we really thought that a combination of HDD on each ends up to the limit of the technology, coupled with jet plowing the line and bury the line in depth that is secure enough for the shipping industry not to worry about anchoring issues, was the best combination to avoid, and we can't say avoid completely because we're still using or laying that cable for 2 to 2.5 miles, but I think we really narrow it down to the least disruptive way to cross the river. And one thing I'll say is that we went even further and looked at with Riverkeeper and the Thruway, can we clip an HVDC line onto the Cuomo Bridge, right? And then we can really say that we've minimized 100% of disturbance on the river. Obviously, as you can imagine, it brings a lot of technical complexities, but it's something that if still possible and if awarded, we'll definitely explore it.
Okay, quick question too. This is from me. When I saw your charts that did a comparative analysis between several of the Tier 4 proposals, the jobs generated by your project are double the other projects or even more. Why is that? I mean, what is so different about your cable that leads to twice as many jobs as the other cables? I didn't really get that.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Adrian. And I can't answer for our competitors and how they are assessing this. One thing I can say is because this is an underground line in, I'll say 95% of the route, it is definitely more intense in terms of jobs, right? And workforce. We need a lot of workers on site every single day for multiple years to trench and lay cables and then put concrete and put everything back as it was before, even better. So it's definitely labor intensive, and that's what I believe explains most of the difference. When you're laying cables on the river, the way you install these cables is not as labor intensive as undergrounding cables along the way.
I would just note to that to come up with that, we did engage the Rockefeller Institute of Public Policy as a third-party validator. So part of our jobs numbers have been validated by a credible third party.
And sort of a follow-up to that, since it's kind of related, is how deep would that cable be buried, since you're talking about the trenching work that you would need to do?
Yes, that's a great question. It really depends on where we are, whether it's Route 17, the 87, and the geology basically of each area, right? So it could go, as deep as 6 to 8 to 10 feet, and sometimes as close at, I believe 6 at least. And then once we get into water, well, it really depends on the geology of the river, the bodies of water. And then once we get in the city, depending on the thermal resistivity of our transmission line and the fact that we're using 320 kV, we in some instances we might have to go deeper than 10-12 feet. So it really depends on where we are building the line and the characteristics of the geology.
Yeah. And Sebastian, if I could just add, that's part of the reason that we think broadband is so attractive here as well. For potential partners, in the cable industry, is it offers, as we're doing that trenching work, the ability to expand broadband to the lower Hudson Valley, to the Catskills, to a lot of areas that might not have access to high-speed internet right now. So that trenching, in many ways, we're doing the work for them. They would just have to bury their lines with ours next to it. And so it really offers a lot of opportunities as we look at this project for the expansion of high-speed internet and broadband.
Yeah, and something important to say is that whenever you're building HVDC, you're already installing also, fiber optic as a communication device to sort of speak between the converter stations, right? So adding more fiber optic is not really, a great cost to the project. So it brings a lot of benefits if we could add more, for sure.
All right, I think we can get in this last question too by Mark. Are you planning any energy storage at Cooper's Corner?
We did submitted 2 offers, and one that included storage with a developer from upstate New York. It's definitely part of the plan. I think moving forward with all the the growth of solar, especially, I think we're gonna require a lot of storage to meet the needs of the state. But yeah, we submitted an offer with and without storage, and hopefully we're selected for the one with storage, because we think it brings a lot of benefits. And as Michael pointed out, we're going to be maybe in 10-15 years in a different scenario where we're going to want to store offshore wind and then be able to transmit it upstate when needed. So yep.
Okay, do you know what the storage capacity is? Do you recall offhand?
For the storage facility?
No, what's the storage capacity?
Yeah, for the storage facility. So
Sorry.
Yes, so a few hundred megawatts. That's what I can say.
All right, so we have one more question. I think we have another minute or two, right? Or
Okay.
no? We out of time again? The injection point is at the southern end of Zone E. Many renewable projects are in northern Zone E and zones A, B, C, and D. What are the constraints between those points and Cooper's Corner?
Yeah, that's a great question. We spend a lot of time assessing different interconnection points from Marcy to Cooper's Corner, right? And what's interesting from the electrical standpoint is that, the corridor from Marcy, Fraser, and then south to Cooper's Corner is really underutilized right now. So we think that by adding a converter station in Cooper's Corner, along with, devices to manage power flows, we can really bring, that upstate renewable power into that, underutilized corridor and a converter station, and then down to New York City. So definitely, I think in the future, whether we continue development in different zones in upstate New York, we're going to need more of these power flow devices, but also converter stations as Excelsior Connect to move the flows into New York City.
Do we have any other questions? Because our queue is empty.
Our queue is empty.
By the way, that should be the word everyone gets to know instead of pipeline.
Yes. All right, well, I think this is great. Doesn't seem to be any last questions, and actually that's perfectly timed, so we appreciate that. I'll just say I want to thank everybody for joining us today. As we said earlier, this is about educating people, giving information. You can see actually from the chart that was provided that there are a number of projects that are being considered. It's our understanding that the state will be making some decisions soon. I'm putting that in quotes, absolutely, as it should be. We want everyone also to know that we have another seminar coming up, and that would be on September 21st, also at noon. And that is for you to hear about the Catskills Renewable Connector. And you can go on either LCV's website or CCE's website and find the landing page and register for that one as well. So Julie, you have any last words of wisdom for us?
No, we're just very excited to continue to learn about these projects, and we're hoping that Governor Hochul and NYSERDA takes action on Tier 4 in the near future, so that we can start moving forward with more clean energy projects. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to Avangrid for providing this great information about your project. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. All
Thanks
right,
for having
everyone,
us.
Thank you.
have a good day.